There's a reason whenever people talk about the greatest classic Mortal Kombat games, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 always comes up. And what's interesting is it's not even the original version. Mortal Kombat 3 came first, and while Mortal Kombat 3 was successful, a lot of fans weren't happy about it. You know, the roster changed, some classic characters were just straight up missing, and the game felt different. And certain gameplay changes weren't exactly loved by everyone. So what did Midway do? They went back to the arcade and basically said, okay, let's fix this, and this is how we got Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, a game that took the foundation of Mortal Kombat 3, added back some fan favorites, introduced new ones, and expanded the gameplay, and eventually it became one of the most beloved Mortal Kombat games of the entire arcade era. But why does UMK3 still matter, and how did a game that was essentially an upgraded version of MK3 become the version that so many fans considered the definitive classic Mortal Kombat? Let's talk about it. But if you guys don't know me by now, I'm Mr. Frosty Flames, but you can call me Mike. We do anything gaming, news, reviews, playthroughs, etc. and we do it in a chill way with no over editing BS. So if you enjoy that style of content, be sure to hit that sub button and join the Mr. Frosty Flames Legion. Anyways, let's get back to the video. So to understand Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, you have to understand Mortal Kombat 3, the original, because MK3 wasn't a bad game, far from it. It introduced some major changes to Mortal Kombat like the run mechanic, chain combos, new character archetypes, you know, you got new stages, a completely different visual style, and a more aggressive pace, which is basically like the MKX of the arcade era. But there was one big problem. Some of the classic characters people loved were just straight up gone. Like, you didn't have characters like Scorpion, Kitana, Melina, Reptile, Johnny Cage. These are OG originals, right? And for a franchise built around these characters, this was a big deal. You know, fans wanted their favorites back, and Midway listened. You know, UMK3 brought back the ninjas. You know, that's probably one of the biggest and most popular characters in Mortal Kombat history. Even like people that don't know Mortal Kombat know the ninjas, like Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Reptile, Kitana, Jade, Melina, and then you have new additions like Ermac and Rain. And suddenly the roster felt like Mortal Kombat again. You still had, you know, the MK3 characters, but now you also had the classic identities that people had been missing, and that's what made UMK3 feel like the best of both worlds. It simply wasn't going backwards, it was combining the old Mortal Kombat with the new Mortal Kombat. And this is something that sounds obvious today, but it was a huge deal back then. You know, Mortal Kombat had built its identity around memorable characters, like I said, so when MK3 removed some of the fan favorites, it created sort of like a disconnect from the fans to the game. UMK3 basically corrected that. It gave players, you know, more choices, you had a bigger roster, more matchups, more rivalries, and more of the characters that people actually wanted to play. And to be honest, that's one of the biggest lessons Mortal Kombat learned from this era. You could evolve the gameplay, you could change the story, you could introduce new characters, but you can't forget the characters that made people fall in love with the franchise in the first place. This is like having like a Street Fighter game without Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li, Cammy, characters like that. And you know, ever since then, you had the ninjas in the game. You always had, you know, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Johnny Cage. I mean, Johnny Cage, what, missed one other game other than that, like Mortal Kombat Deception, and that's it? Scorpion and Sub-Zero, they were basically in every single Mortal Kombat game. The same with Raiden, Kitana, man. People love these characters. You can't have a game without it, even up until now. You see, starting from the NRS era, you could see that characters like Kitana, Melina, Jade, they're highly requested, but they're always in every single game. Johnny Cage, Sonya, even as a cameo, Kano, these classic characters people love. Even MK11, didn't they get death threats because they didn't put Melina into the game? The fans are crazy and they're hella passionate for these characters. And to be honest, another reason UMK3 is remembered so fondly is the gameplay, because UMK3 is fast, it's aggressive, the run mechanic changed everything, and suddenly you weren't just standing across the screen, you know, waiting for your opponent. You could run towards them, put pressure on them, start combos, and create a more aggressive pace. The combo system was also incredibly important for the future of the franchise because UMK3 leaned heavily into chain combos, and when you combine that into run, you suddenly get a Mortal Kombat game that feels extremely chaotic and aggressive, and that's part of what makes it fun, and it laid the foundation for the game's future, especially like Mortal Kombat 4, and then the 3D era kind of threw it all away, but then they brought it back in Mortal Kombat 9 and MKX and onwards, right? It became the competitive MK3. Out of all the arcade games, people play UMK3 the most competitively. And that also helped establish something that Mortal Kombat would continue to develop over the years, and that's competitive play, you know, comp scene, the pro players, the esports, etc., whatever you want to call it. People weren't just playing UMK3 casually. They were learning matchups, learning combos, figuring out which characters were the meta, you know, who was the strongest, who was the weakest, what's the tier list, finding exploits, discovering strategies, and trying to become the best player at their local arcade. The arcade environment was perfect for this. You'd play someone, they'd beat you, you put another quarter in, and you try again. And that's the culture Mortal Kombat was born from, and UMK3 represents that era incredibly well. And on top of everything that I said, UMK3 was absurdly packed. You know, it had that classic Mortal Kombat mentality of, you know, why not put everything in here? You got a huge roster for the time. You had secrets all over the place, right? This game was the pinnacle of Mortal Kombat secrets. You had unlockable fights, you know, multiple versions of characters, the return of classic ninjas. You had new characters, boss characters, secret encounters, and all that crazy stuff to discover. It was one of those arcade games where you could keep playing and still find something new that you've never seen before. And that's something I think modern fighting games sometimes struggle to recreate: the mystery, the secrets, the feeling that there might be something you haven't discovered yet. You know, the 3D era did it well, the arcade era did it well, but the modern NRS era doesn't really do it too well. I mean, you have the Pink Floyd stuff, right? But that's about it, right? What other secrets are there in Mortal Kombat 1? I mean, they took it all away when they took away the crypt in MK1, right? They had it in MK11. It was the best thing of MK11, so why did they take it away? They just completely gutted it, and then now we have Invasions. There's hardly anything in Invasions, right? There's no references, there's nothing. It's just timeline nonsense. But all that is a story for a different video. We're gonna go back to UMK3, the peak arcade era, the best arcade era. This is where UMK3's reputation becomes interesting, because when people debate the arcade era Mortal Kombat games, you usually hear three names: Mortal Kombat, Mortal Kombat 2, and UMK3, and sometimes Mortal Kombat Trilogy because of the arcade edition port that was on the PC, and plus it just encapsulates all of the arcade games onto consoles. And I completely understand why UMK3 gets that respect, you know, because people think it's the best. You know, UMK3 is the best, MK2 is iconic, but UMK3 feels like just the combination of just everything Midway has learned. You know, MK1 created the formula, MK2 expanded it, MK3 experimented with it, and UMK3, it sort of refined it. It took the new mechanics, it brought back classic characters, added new content, and created one of the deepest versions of classic Mortal Kombat. And that's why so many people call it the definitive arcade Mortal Kombat game. But getting to the main point of my video, why does Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 still matter? You could say it's like the run mechanic, or, you know, the combos, the chain combos, the aggressive rosters, stuff that would be continued on later in Mortal Kombat. However, I think it's much more than that. I think it represents something that Mortal Kombat doesn't really have anymore: the arcade era. That basically shows all of that. This was before Mortal Kombat had DLC, before seasons, before patches, before live service updates. If Midway wanted to fix something, they had to release another version, and that's exactly what UMK3 was. And then we'll see it again later with Mortal Kombat 4 Gold. It was Midway responding to criticism, listening to fans, bringing back characters, and refining the game. And somehow that resulted in what many people consider the best Mortal Kombat ever made. And that's pretty incredible, because looking back, UMK3 is much more than just MK3 but better. It's the game that proved Mortal Kombat could listen to its fans, fix mistakes, you know, and push the franchise forward. It brought back the classic characters people wanted, refined the gameplay, and created one of the fastest and most aggressive games in the series, and became a competitive classic that people still respect decades later. MK2 may have established Mortal Kombat's identity, but I believe that UMK3 showed what that identity could become if everything came together, and that's why I believe Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 still matters. And honestly, if you had me pick one game that represents the classic arcade era of Mortal Kombat, it's really hard to argue against UMK3. Man, I love Mortal Kombat Trilogy. That's probably my favorite, you know, game that has that same arcade style feel. But if I had to strictly pick an arcade game, I would pick UMK3. But I want to hear from you guys. Do you think Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 is the greatest arcade era Mortal Kombat of all time, or does MK2 still hold that crown? Let me know in the comments down below. But if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to join the Mr. Frosty Flames Legion. Thank you guys for watching. Mr. Frosty Flames out. Ciao.